These guys were between the ages of 10 or 11 right through to sort of, university level. And I was like, oh, how's this going to go? And they was just so switched on.
The kids are great. I can't understand anything they're saying, though. All the slang they've come up with is just, I feel so old.
Dude, I'm 50.
I'm in my mid-30s. I didn't think I was that old, but I've been firmly put in my place by a number of interns over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, and I reckon there was gags going across the room that I just was not getting. Some of them were about me, some of them weren't.
And the hand gestures, they've got like code, there's hand gesture stuff. Getting a Gen Zer on the pod.
I need a translator.
Yeah, I was going to say, and we can subtitle them or something.
Yeah. And what did they just say then? The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address. Because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Tuesday evening on the lands of the Kaurna people. Because I'm in Adelaide, a town that I called home for 5 years. I'm over here on Dunn Street duties, just literally rushed from the SDA and ran a workshop on public narrative with a bunch of young union activists, which was a lot of fun. Thanks to the SDA for bringing me over. Really appreciate it. Good to re-engage with some of the family. And now I'm going to re-engage with some other family. It's our mailbag episode. This month has gone very, very quickly. So to help me unpack a whole bunch of mailbag questions from our Patreon subscribers, I'm once again joined by the former Chief of Staff to the electorate winning machine of Daniel Andrews, and she's now a managing partner at FMRS Advisory, Lissie Ratcliff. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
And he is the Director for Campaigns and Strategy at Unions New South Wales. And someone said to me the other day, arguably probably the funniest male member of the Australian Labor Party, Todd Pinkerton. Welcome back.
That's a hell of a compliment. Thank you.
Isn't it?
That's a high bar for this episode.
Yeah, you should hang on to that one.
I know. I kind of thought, should I tell Todd that before the show? Or no, I'm just going to throw it on him and see if he can live up to it.
Is that independently verified? I don't know. That's tough to know. Yeah.
I think you're a funny bloke, Todd. So that's why.
That's very kind. That's a high bar. I'll see how I go today.
You can be the official funny person of our podcast.
Okay, so let's dive into it. Lots of questions from our Patreon subscribers this week, starting with the first one from Phase 666. Do you think the Albanese government should be moving ahead with reducing the capital gains discount? There's been a lot of chatter in the media in the last couple of weeks about this, and I want to dedicate a bit of the show to actually unpacking this. Lissie, I think you're the policy brains out of the three of us.
I think you mean that as an insult, Stephen.
I don't mean to undermine Todd. Todd definitely has bigger policy brains than I do. But I want to go to you first of all, Lissie. Maybe sort of frame up this debate about the pros and cons of this capital gains discount and what it actually means before we sort of dive into the politics of it all.
Sure. So let me do my best policy summary, I guess. So look, capital gains tax has been around in Australia since 1985, but it came into its current effect basically when the Howard government made a change that meant that if you've held an asset for more than 12 months, you get a 50% discount effectively on the gain, on the tax you would pay on the gain that you've made. So while it applies to assets of all kinds like shares, most of the focus in this debate is on housing. And because we've seen such a massive increase in the last couple of decades in the number of people who own more than one property, so have investment properties of different, or holiday homes or whatever, second homes, whatever it might be, and because those people, the people who own those properties are statistically becoming the older part of the population, progressively it's playing a part in squeezing younger people out of their ability to access the housing market. So that's kind of the snapshot of it. CGT is one of the big kind of ticket tax options, which the Labor Party floated a couple of big housing tax option changes back in 2019, and we all know that went badly. But you've seen a lot of political commentators in the life of this government screaming out saying we need to see big tax reform, and then the government goes and floats potential big tax reform, and a whole bunch of these conservative commentators say, no, well, we didn't mean like that, without then saying what they actually mean. So I think my take on this would be a couple of things. One, the way the kind of set of national housing taxes is currently set up is not sustainable, and at some point politically it is going to be untenable for a federal government not to move on it. I think it's a question of when and how, not if. And I'd say Jim Chalmers as a Treasurer has kind of pushed the boat out on this and flown the kite, and the Prime Minister so far has not killed it, and he has shown before that he is ready and willing to shoot down things from his colleagues if he doesn't want to take the risk on them. But I'd say the fact that it's out there and it's still going means it's, as an idea, it's breathing. Whether it survives until the budget, let's see. But I think for the moment they're definitely testing the water, and good on them, like they should.
I want to talk more about the politics of it now, but can we go back and remind ourselves of how tortured we are and how tortured previous Labor oppositions have been? Let's talk about 2019. Todd, what lessons are there, do you think, from the 2019 experience in terms of how you would approach trying to sell something as significant as this in terms of tax reform?
Well, in the sense of 2019, I thought you look at the result, the policies that we took to 2019, particularly in housing, so capital gains as well as negative gearing, were also taken to the 2016 election. And I think we learnt the wrong lesson out of 2016, which is we had a great result in 2016, clawed back a whole bunch of seats from the 2013 election. And that was because we made an election. There was an election campaign around the real and ever-present threat to Medicare from the Libs. And we thought that because of the success of that result, that we had essentially silenced, or we had sort of removed the opposition to taking these bold tax reforms. When we went into 2019, we didn't make an issue like Medicare the election. We were effectively made the campaign issue. So the entire election became a referendum on the government, on Bill Shorten's proposed tax reforms and how they would sort of fund unspecified increases in education and health, very needed reforms in terms of like investment and very needed expansions in services. But we effectively put our agenda up and made it the election a referendum on us. So I don't know, in the sense of it, it's not necessarily that the policy itself is bad, but it is that the policy is okay if it can be part of the framing of if you frame the election correctly. So you've made the election a choice in which our policy is a benefit. To me, there seems to be a lesson for the government going forward on the CGT discount reforms. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of acronyms, I think, floating around on this one. I mean, it's a no-brainer to do it, right? I think Oxfam came out today and showed research that only 50% of the benefit from the discount goes to only 24,000 Australians. Which is, I think, 0.1%, less than 0.1% of Australians. It costs something like $250 billion over the next 10 years. What I think will be interesting is whether the government, should this idea continue till May, go with the sort of the 2019 framing, which is this funding, this savings, we're going to invest that back into the community, we're going to give that in more services. Or this idea that's also been floated is, do you return it and say like personal income tax relief or changes? Obviously, we're in an inflationary environment, and I imagine the RBA will have a lot to say about giving people a lot more disposable cash at this time. But I think it's an interesting point for the government is if they're going to go through all of the next couple of months of speculation and all this debate, how do they make How do they make the benefits of taking on these tax reforms, of taking away the sort of benefits that are going to a very slim proportion of the Australian society, and reward it? How do they make more winners than losers out of the debate, which is, I think, the failure we made in 2019?
In 2019, when we talked about negative gearing or talked about capital gains, there was a view that we'd never made the argument to the electorate of what the problem was in the first place. Do you think that the electorate does now understand the problems associated with housing, and that therefore bringing in a policy like this just makes sense to voters? And I'm particularly thinking about not so much the boomers, but my back of an envelope research tells me that the boomer cohort only make up 33% of the electorate, Gen X 20%, and millennials and Gen Z combined make up to 47% of the electorate, right? So mathematically you think it makes sense. But if you run a campaign that spooks them, like was done in 2019, you're not going to get over the line, and then you're in trouble. But I'm wondering to myself, does that 47%, do those millennials and Gen Zs, are they actually across the issue now and go, yeah, I'm well aware that I cannot get into the housing market, ergo I see that this policy is a solution that will make it easier for me. So therefore, it should be easier for Jim Chalmers to roll that out. Lissie, I'm keen for your thoughts, and I'll come to you, Todd, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the answer is partly. I think more and more, it will be self-evident to many more people now, just with the passage of time, that they have no hope of getting into the housing market on their own. And basically, that's now the situation. Unless someone else, usually your parents or some other relative, gives you money, you just cannot possibly, on any kind of vaguely average salary, afford to get into the housing market before you're, 40 or older in many cases. So people, I think, know that it's not currently possible for them. How across the different tax settings and other things that are helping to contribute to that problem, I think that's maybe a different question. But I do think that in the, what are we now, kind of coming up to 7 years since that last, big property tax election in 2019, is the problem more acute? Yes. Are more people attuned to it? Yes. Do more people think it's a problem that they want someone to do something about? Yes. So is the ground kind of better set now for that debate to be had? Yeah, I think it is. But, to Todd's point earlier, I think if the government allows it to be framed as simply about what they are taking away from some cohort or any cohort of people, that is not enough. And you've got to talk about what's the give? Like, what are people going to benefit from? And whether it's, tax, income tax, or, improvement in services, or whatever they want to do with it, you can't just have the takeaway, because otherwise you'll just end up in this kind of vicious cycle of people thinking, well, hang on, maybe I can get myself into that position, and if I do, then I don't want that to be taken away from me either. So you get into this kind of aspirational kind of spiral problem there. I think, but I think that more and more people are fundamentally understanding that we've now got a situation where housing has become an asset class rather than about having somewhere to live, and that is fundamentally not a sustainable thing. But the government is still going to have to run hard in a persuasion campaign on this if they want to do it, and do it successfully.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think the government's going to have to find a way to frame it as a benefit to the community, and that there's going to be more winners than losers with respect to the change, particularly if you make it entirely a debate around what we will take away from X person. Suddenly you get into a competition about who can define that person first, right? So there'll be efforts to define them as the richest people in Australia, or the property owning class, and there'll be efforts to also define them as mum and dad investors, or your parents who own property who want to pass them on to the next generation. I do think, however, that the detail isn't as important in this sense, because I think, as to your point about like millennials and Gen Zs, they have it. I think it is an absolute item of truth for them that they believe that the housing and affordability is the system. It's not a bug. It's not like a failure of policy. It is a deliberate result of the
It's a
policy
choice.
settings. It's a choice. The government has chosen, successive governments have chosen to maintain the value of property because it's been a really safe investment for people. It's been their entire nest egg of their livelihoods. But it's also come at the cost of a next generation who are now thinking to themselves, will I ever own my own property? Like I was talking to a Gen Z the other day who told me that they no longer do house parties because who has a house to live in? That's not a realm for them for the life they're in. Like I just think, but I don't think the government would need to get deep into the weeds of explaining to younger voters. They're going to say, this is a tax policy that currently benefits people owning property, but we're going to redistribute the benefits of that through a variety of things that are going to be good for you. And one of the flow-on effects is going to be greater housing affordability into the future as we slowly sort of deflate the property balloon of value. So, yeah, I don't need that. The government's just got to find a good way to frame it and make it a winning debate rather than one where the entire debate becomes about the government's plan to take away something from someone.
And you think about it in terms of how through the Howard years, the foundations of their electoral success was this group called the Howard Battlers. But essentially it was a relationship that the Howard government built with a large cohort of voters over a sustained period of time that we just couldn't crack. And I think looking at this, this is an opportunity to build a relationship with a generation of voters, a large cohort of voters that's only going to continue to grow. I mean, we're saying it's 47% at the moment, and obviously you're not going to get all 47% of them, right? But it's a big group that's going to continue to grow. And if you can put a stake in the ground now with substantial policy reform that they go, that's fantastic, I am absolutely all about that, then you can build that relationship with them that then enables you to then continue to do more things into the future. It becomes this unbreakable bond, like what the Howard government had with that group that was called the Howard Battlers. I just think there's so much upside. When I read these articles about commentators saying this is politically risky, I think it falls into that category, and we've talked about this in the past, that it's 60% of the electorate probably think it's a wonderful idea. 10% are going to get really pissed off about it and yell and scream. It's going to get front pages of all the newspapers. It creates controversy, but it's an upside for government. It's something that, Lissie, you guys in the Andrews government did so well over such a long period of time, and we're now starting to see the Minns government do it quite well as well. And here, I'm here in South Australia and talking to folks here that the Malinauskas government have done very well. Here's an opportunity for the Feds to grab something that's going to be controversial, but the vast majority of Australian voters in those key targeted seats support, and it's good. It's a good foundation, not just going into the next election, but into winning successive campaigns going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's right, Stephen. And I think we talked on the show last month about conflict as a communication strategy, and that's absolutely part of this. And I mean, politics is about choices, right? Like who do you stand with and for, and who are you against? And if you try to be everything to all people all the time, you'll end up doing nothing of substance because you'll keep looking around for complete consensus all the time, and that way lies just complete failure. So if the Albanese government does decide that they're going to bite off capital gains tax reform, then there will be a bunch of people who will be upset about that, and they will be nearly every commentator, I'm going to hazard a guess, in the Financial Review and writing for the Australian, and there'll be like we saw the other day. John Howard and Peter Costello came out blasting in the AFR about how this was a terrible, tax grab idea. Never mind that, they're the ones who introduced the GST. Shocking that someone might have put in place a new tax. But which I just think, like I saw that and I thought, like, how completely and utterly irrelevant. One, two massive Tories who oppose an idea from a Labor government, like shock, what impartial commentators. But two, like, they've been out of government now for 20 years almost. And I think to your point, Stephen, like sometimes like ideas do have their time and their moment arrives, and where, 2, 5, 10, 20 years ago, that idea would have been very politically risky and You may not have been able to find a way to get it up. Like, things move on. The housing crisis gets more acute with every month and every year that passes, and it affects more and more people. And so demographically, things are on the side of a government that wants to do something about this, as long as they've got they're ready for the fight, they've got a good answer about what they're going to do with it, and they've got a good story to tell, to your point, Todd, about what are the values that underpin the choice that this Labor government, are making to tackle this problem and offer this solution. Like, why are we doing this? Who are we with? And, what's the point of it all? And as long as they've got a story that speaks to our values as a party and resonates with Australians, then yes, Stephen, there's no reason why this generation can't be our people that, stick with us because we stick with them.
And on the flip side, if you're Susan Ley or Angus Taylor or whoever the next leader,
other problems right now.
but whoever the next leader may be, I'd be shitting myself if the Labor government made this call, because I'd be going, oh God, what do we do? Do we oppose it? And if we oppose it, we're basically aligning ourselves with a group that's probably voting for us anyway, which is our older generational boomers. We're trying to make inroads into the young vote. This is not going to help at all. I would be hoping that Jim Chalmers blinks and doesn't do it.
Stephen, I think you're giving way too much credit. I reckon they're like, we cannot wait to just consolidate our support amongst the people who've always voted, that slim proportion of people that always voted for us. We cannot wait to do the thing everyone knows we're going to do. Like, you're giving them way too much credit that they're like, this will might wedge us. They're like, this will be great. Finally, we can go back to true colours. Like, they got no interest in realigning themselves with the coming wave of voters, clearly. If they were, they wouldn't be spending so much time talking about themselves.
And fighting over the things they're fighting about. Yeah, that may well actually be the case. I think they will certainly, that said, what today is actually a mainstream Liberal Party member, I have no earthly idea, or voter, but given they're kind of peeling off them at a great rate. But if you can think about their historical natural constituency, business, older people, people with more money, and just general kind of conservatives that will all push them in the direction of opposing this stuff straight up. And if they do, great, there's your contest.
Bring it on. Well, hopefully the Prime Minister and the Treasurer do something substantial in this space leading up to the budget. And as you said, Lissie, hasn't been shot down yet, so it's still alive.
I think every day that you wake up and the PM hasn't said, actually, we're not doing that, is another day that it continues on in the budget process, would be my view.
Thanks, Faye666 for that question. The next one comes from Jim. He asked, reports that Peter Mandelson was involved in the manoeuvring to help torpedo Kevin Rudd's mining super profits tax raise a bigger question. How much have foreign powers, particularly the US-aligned political entities and corporate interests, made it politically impossible for Australia to secure a fair share of its resource wealth? It goes on to say, Labor has taken serious runs at it. Obviously, the Whitlam government tried, and then Kevin Rudd, but it tends to be blown out of the water when a government tries. Can this be overcome with better comms, or are the forces simply too great? Thank you, Jim, for that question. And I sort of thought to myself about that, because he sort of talked about US aligned and also corporate interests. And I went back and actually looked at the 2010 debate around the mining resources tax. And $22 million was spent on media and advertising and political campaigns by BHP and Rio in particular to sink that tax and obviously to damage Rudd's position. And one thing I sort of thought to myself, it's not always just money. If we've learned anything from the yes referendum or Hillary Clinton's campaign against Trump, or Kamala Harris's campaign against Trump, where they both outspent their opponent but didn't get a result, doesn't always mean you're going to win. But I just want to get your thoughts on this particular issue. Is it foreign powers, or is it just capital investment? Is it people with money that talk? Who wants to take a stab at this one? I forgot who I said I was going to go to on this question. Who wants to have a crack at this one first?
Look, I think on this one, and mineral resource rent tax, I think is a good example. I'd say if any government anywhere, I think this probably applies broader than Australia, but certainly here as well, if you are going to try and make a policy tax change of any kind that takes a big revenue hit to big business, then like they're going to fight back. They're well resourced. In some cases, they can be quite well organised, whether it's through the Business Council or other, peak bodies and whatnot. And they've got a big megaphone and people listen to them. So that doesn't mean they always win. And having a lot of money isn't the same as having a persuasive campaign and running it well. But governments should be prepared for that if you're going to make changes. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. If you think it's the right thing to do for the country and it's the right thing to do for Australians, then absolutely have the crack. Just don't expect business not to, advocate for their own interests and stand up for their own constituency, which in most cases is their shareholders. But it's not the government's job to roll over to that because they have a different set of responsibilities, but you've got to be prepared to fight. And in that instance, the Labor government, they got outflanked, not just outspent.
A bit of revision history here, given it was 16 years. Oh my God, it was 16 years ago. But I mean, do we think that unbelievable? So much has happened at that time. Do you think that the Rudd government blinked? Like, you think about. I mean, I know the Minns government's in its early days, but it certainly has demonstrated thus far that this is what we stand for, and this is the agenda we're going to execute. And the Andrews government definitely did that. Sometimes do we just kind of get a little bit whipped by maybe what's happening on Talkback, or are we looking at the wrong indicators to suggest, is this government out of kilter with the wider public's perception? Todd, what are your reflections on governments being focused on a strategy and just executing it and not worrying too much about the kind of the pressure they're getting from external actors?
I think it depends on the strategy that you're running, right? And particularly the brand or frame that you want to do, like the sort of the message that you want to present for the government. So I think, I think you made a reference to like the Minns government, like they've been really deliberate about the fights that they have picked, some of them with the union movement, some of them with the business community. Their governments, they've made a sort of a virtue out of conflict in the sense of if they move a policy, it's because they believe in it. They think it's the right outcome, even if it is going to require some conflict to land it, or there's going to be strong opposition, and they'll land it. That was our experience all throughout, say, the workers' compensation fight that we had with the government. They had made a decision that they were intending to pass that legislation. It didn't mean that great concessions weren't made throughout it. It doesn't mean that there were other good wins. There's a lot of stuff, I think, that obviously that actual bill's, I think, finished, that bill passed last week. But in the same token, they've currently got to fight on with the business groups in New South Wales around regulating AI. Like the Minns government, but they've sort of made a virtue out of this belief that if they're going to put up a bill, it's because they believe in it. Where I think other governments have made virtues out of, look, we've put up the thing, we've heard the community sentiment, we're going to take a step back from that and we're going to move on to the next thing. We listen. It really depends on what's consistent with the brand. I don't think you can run the sort of attitude of a fierce public advocate for the thing you believe in if you're also always sort of ducking and weaving and changing your positions, in the same way that you can't say we always listen to community feedback and we're prepared to take on the feedback or input and then just plow ahead with whatever you want to do sort of anywhere, right? It's whether it's sort of as a political electoral tactic, it's got to be consistent with the broader message that you're trying to frame up as the government. And I think this is only my reflections from the minerals resource rent tax, because it was the example we used, right, was from all account, like the sort of the optimism and enthusiasm that came with the election of the Rudd government in 2007. I thought he presented himself, that government presented itself as one of sort of principle that was taking on these big policy things and they were going to get them done. And I think the thing that was probably the sort of reason it sort of created so much sort of discontent amongst voters, I think, for the Rudd government was this belief that there was such momentum and optimism behind the Kevin 07 machinery to see it sort of stunted or stopped by the efforts of Australia's mining companies kind of cut across the kind of core brand or the core strength that government had. It wasn't a government that was trying to present itself as, I guess the point of that is it's not so much about you can make a value, you can make a benefit or a moral benefit to your government if it's consistent with the broader story you're trying to tell about the government. Sometimes backing down, I think, does more detriment. It's actually the back down that kills you, not the fact you proposed the policy in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that, because you get done for the original sin of having had the idea to begin with, and then you look weak for having caved at the other end. So there's a real there's a line where you're better off in some cases just sticking to your guns. But yeah, I think, and look, I'm not going to pretend that I have the electoral map for 2010 like nailed into my brain. I do not. But the reality with minerals resource rent tax in that example, excuse me, is that like geographically that is a particularly hot issue in two states in this country, being Queensland and WA, probably in the other order to be fair. And like the Prime Minister at that point was from Queensland, the Treasurer was from Queensland, and, WA, we all know, how kind of politically sensitive that state is for, well, basically everybody. So sometimes, Stephen, I think to your question, can government spend too much time and attention on what is actually just noise from the media and kind of different interest groups? Absolutely. I have no idea what their polling was telling them in 2010 and whether it was really cutting through or whether they were sort of knee-jerk reacting. But I imagine that in WA and probably Queensland, where mining, they're big industries, a lot of people are employed there, unions, I don't remember, but I assume were probably in those industries were probably not in favour of the tax either. So it's quite possible they didn't have their stakeholder strategy sorted before they went out with it. And in the end, they looked around, they made the judgment, they didn't have enough people with them, so they stopped.
I remember one of the anecdotes coming out of that campaign was the Minerals Resource Australia, or whatever they're called, had organised volunteers at the airports to get fly in, fly out workers to sign the petition to demand that the government doesn't implement it. And it was Western Australian and Queensland federal Labor MPs that were going through the airports and seeing that happen and were
freaked out, probably.
Freaked out, right? But that tactic within itself, I mean, that's great campaigning. Like, good on you for doing that. Like, I'm not shitting on the actual tactic, but like, I felt like it's kind of like when you do a mail out that you only send it to, do one mail out and you just send it to the Liberal MP just to freak them out. Like, it kind of.
Or you letterbox their house directly.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's just, and they're getting one each week and they're going, oh my God, they're doing weekly mail outs.
We've all done that to candidates before.
Yeah.
My favourite is like
one street in the electorate.
I like rolling the truck full of cornflakes past the Lib candidate's house every day. Just so
100%. Or the truck going past with the
just getting in their heads. And like you said, like, it's a long time ago, so who knows what maybe I need to get Kevin Rudd back on the show and get to talk to a bit about, what did they think was going on. But I just think sometimes I think we've learned a bit since then is that we've seen good Labor governments at a state level anyway haven't blinked. They've gone, no, this is our plan and this is what we're going to do. And the ones that do that, because that's authenticity in itself. Voters are always going, I just want a government that bloody knows what they're doing and they're just authentic and they are themselves. And I think that Labor government should be just, no, this is, got elected on this and this is what we're going to do now. And I think that's a strong brand that the Labor government had in Victoria, and I think that we're seeing this in New South Wales as well in its early days anyway. There's sort of. Thanks for that question, Jim. Let's now go to one from Kazza. Kazza, who's arguably top 10 most loyal listeners to Social Democratic.
Top 5.
So absolutely love when she sends in a question, but she's got a bunch here. Probably not for this podcast, but you know what, Kazza? I'm just going to read it out anyway. But the Epstein files look like the biggest blackmail ring ever. We had Rudd named when he had power, and I believe was a bit of a target. Wondering also, she's sort of about the ex-UK foreign minister was a target, but what's this all about? Just asking questions about it. So many questions about these Epstein files. Look, I guess what I want to sort of talk here is probably a segue into talking about UK politics. I've intentionally, and we were talking off air Todd said to me before, I just have not bothered to read the Epstein file stuff. And I'm the same. Like, I see anything Epstein related, I just don't want to read about. I'm not interested in it. But you know what? It's a story that won't go away. And what I'm noticing is it's kind of like in Stranger Things, the sort of the tentacles of the hive mind is just ever present throughout Western and non-Western politics, because so many people have met with this person over the course of his time involved in money and business and politics and whatnot. Like you see the Clintons trying to get out of a subpoena from Congress to appear before a committee. So many people have just been touched by this. And what we've seen in the last week or so, it's really, really had an impact in UK politics, because Peter Mandelson was appointed the ambassador for the UK to the United States. And it's now turned out that the government were aware of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that was very, very deep. It wasn't just sort of, I went to his house one day. It was actually embedded into decisions around government and his own personal affairs and a whole bunch of other things. So what's happened since then is that, there's been a big campaign in the media in the UK about this. The Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney, has resigned over the matter. It also looks like his Director of Communications has also resigned over the matter. We now have the Scottish Labor Party leader in Holyrood, so not a part of Westminster in the actual Scottish Parliament. And Sarwar's called on Keir Starmer to resign ahead of the Scottish elections in May. It's real. We had John McTiernan on last month talking about the challenges that the UK government's going through right now, and then this Epstein stuff has just been an absolute kicker for them. And Lissie, to you first, you were over in the UK last month. I know you met with a whole bunch of folks from across the movement. This crisis that is crippling this government right now. I mean, what's your broad take on it? Can they survive this? Yeah, well,
I think, it's probably important to note that, the reason that the Epstein files are causing, or the original reason they're causing so much interest, is because this guy is a convicted sex trafficker and has done did all sorts of totally horrendous things. Well, now that Congress is investigating the US and they've subpoenaed, millions, it looks like, of documents, all manner of people having their emails and their text messages and their correspondence and all sorts of other stuff released. So it's this rolling kind of blitz of stuff of these, as you say, very famous people from all over the world getting kind of dragged into this through their associations with Epstein of varying kinds. The UK government, I think it is reasonable to say, before the Mandelson sort of part of the scandal took off, or properly took off, was already in existential trouble. They are relatively early in their term, but they just can't seem to get a grip on the agenda and a strategy and a message, and their polling is terrible. And as you say, they've got elections coming up in Scotland and Wales in just a few months, and those parts of the party are understandably starting to freak out about the fact that the Westminster government is so unpopular that they cannot get people to focus on local issues, because all they want to do is talk about how the Labor government in Westminster is doing a terrible job, in their opinion. So I think, and then this has happened, and the links that Mandelson's had with Epstein, as you say, Stephen, are extensive and long-standing and extremely well documented. And so the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has taken responsibility for advising that he should be appointed to the ambassadorship in Washington, and has resigned. Now, normally, it's one thing for a staff member to resign, but I think part of the difference here is Morgan McSweeney has been, I think, credited by basically 100% of the British political commentariat and the Labor Party with, I used the word masterminding, seems to be getting used a lot, but nonetheless, getting Keir Starmer to be the Labor leader, getting Keir Starmer to win the election and become the Prime Minister and elect a Labor government, and then after a short period where he was some other senior role at 10 Downing Street, then became the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. So these two, the interesting thing about this, I think, from a purely kind of political operations point of view, is this is the first time that Keir Starmer is going to be the leader of his party and the Prime Minister without McSweeney right next to him. And I think the thing that people are interested to see is, what does the government look like without McSweeney running it, and who is Keir Starmer without him? Because one of the things that Starmer's accused of a lot is having no politics. And, I mean, I would say a lot of the criticism of the government so far is that their political decision-making and their ability to sell a political message and stick to a political policy position have been a large part of the problem. But that's a huge vacuum that's been left at the top of the government now. And then there's the question, as you say, people are still calling for Starmer to go. Every cabinet minister has been, I was just reading in the Times before, has been ordered to tweet their support, and they have all done that, including his two main leadership rivals. But probably worth noting that those two, so Wes Streeting from the right and Angela Rayner from the left, both have their own issues that they're trying to tidy up just at the minute. So a leadership challenge in February may not suit either of them particularly. Might be after those election results might be a better time for both of them. But that's another 4 months of tanking polls and things going pretty badly that they're giving away. I
also read today that Rayner, one of the potential candidates for the leadership, accidentally published her Rayner for Leader website for
did she?
Like a couple of seconds, and someone got it.
That's bad. So Wes Streeting dumped all of his. So he's because he's kind of been historically a bit close to some of these Blairite, all this Blairite kind of part of the party that Mandelson's from. He preemptively released all of his text WhatsApp messages with Mandelson to Sky News, I think last night or this morning, to try and get ahead of people in the left of the party, briefing that he is also tarred by this Mandelson brush, so couldn't possibly be leader. So he's gone out and dumped all these text messages, which include him saying things, like, I think I'm going to lose my seat. The government has no growth strategy, all this other stuff. So he's decided that all of that is a better risk to take than, having people kind of speculating about what else is in his communications with this former party elder, who has now resigned from the Labor Party, we should add.
Todd, do you have anything to add to this shit sandwich that is the UK Labor Party?
Nothing to add on the UK Labor Party other than just to caveat your comments before, like this evolving disaster of these Epstein files in terms of the information that is coming out. It's sickening. It's awful. It's a vile just description of just the political power that was wielded by this monster. I mean, I was only reading earlier that, like, in the sort of mass dumping of files that the US Congress has been doing because they're trying to get the information out there, the victims' details information has been released as part of it. Some things are being redacted, some things are not. Like, there is a little bit to be said for sort of the irresponsibility. There's a sort of irresponsibility of the way that some of this information is getting disseminated out there. I mean, I think they're quite right that the people who are being caught up, these extensive relationships they've had, are facing political judgment, and it's having huge political ramifications, as we just discussed in the UK circumstance, and that is all right and just and has to be resolved, and the public has to ultimately vote on it. But it is just, it's just so hard to. It's just so hard to look, and it's harder to look away on this whole sort of thing. We'll only hear more of it going forward.
Yeah, I read either the Post or the New York Times had contacted the office or the department or the body that's having in charge of releasing all of the files, and they'd found through their, they've obviously got a whole team of people researching through it, and they found pages upon pages of pages where they hadn't redacted photos of victims and stuff, and actually contacted the agency or whatever and said, hey, on the live document, you need to clean this up because you've actually got. And you can only just feel for families of those victims. Absolutely appalling.
I remember a couple of years ago there was I think Netflix had a documentary out. I mean, I think I got through 6 minutes of it before I felt sick and couldn't look at it. It's just awful.
It's grim.
Disgusting. It's grim. It's disgusting. It's everything it's everything you don't want to believe about the world.
Yeah. Before we just jump off of the UK stuff, Lissie, just interested in your thoughts as a former chief of staff to a leader, looking at the Morgan McSweeney. I mean, so many articles written about Morgan McSweeney. Like, if you're broadly interested in UK politics, even if you don't live there, you probably know who Morgan McSweeney is now. I think that throughout Daniel Andrews' time in government, I don't think many people knew who you were, Lissie. I mean, I don't want to cast judgment on Morgan. Maybe he didn't invite this media on him, but I mean, how do you manage to? How do we get to a situation where staffer is sort of front and center of the news media cycle in UK politics?
I mean, look, that's a very good question, and I think part of the answer lies in if there's a book called, I think it's called Get In, which was written about the last UK election, and part of I'm going to fully concede I haven't finished the book, but the first part of it that I have read, and which I think has got quite a bit of commentary as well, is really the story of how Morgan McSweeney single-handedly sets the strategy to take UK Labor back from the Corbynite left, drag it back into the centre, and then goes and finds a candidate whom he can kind of put out the front of the party to make it electable, and then kind of runs the whole thing. And basically, the takeout message of at least the first part of that book is it's Morgan McSweeney's world and Keir Starmer's just living in it. Now, whether that is a fair summary or an accurate one, I will have to leave to people who actually work in that government and know. But that is certainly the vibe that has kind of permeated the commentary about UK politics for the last few years. I mean, I would say in this country we tend to be much more of and certainly in the government that I worked in, if the staff became the story, that was a bad thing, because no matter how effective you are at your job, whether it's chief of staff or any other political staffer, if you're becoming the story, that's a distraction. And ultimately, if you're a staffer, you're there to support whichever politician you're working for, whether they're a backbench MP or they're the Prime Minister or anybody in between. Like, you're not supposed to be the point. Like, you're there to help them do their job in whatever your role is. And I think, like, no doubt being the chief of staff to a Prime Minister or a Premier is that's a big deal, and it's an important job, and you get a lot of influence and power through those jobs, particularly if you're good at them and you're trusted by whoever your principal is. But ultimately, you're not the decision maker, they are. It's your job to help them make decisions, but not to replace them as the person who has to be accountable for those things, because the politician's the one who are accountable to the public. That's why they're there. And that's how they're there too, more to the point. So I think that Starmer has still got a bit of a residual problem. McSweeney's walked the plank, and so he's out. He's taken accountability for the advice that he provided, and that's fine, to some extent, good on him. And he's not the first staffer to do that. But that doesn't change the fact that Keir Starmer is the person as the Prime Minister who made the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to Washington. Nobody else made that decision, regardless of how many people told him it was a good idea. And so this is, I think the general consensus is going to be McSweeney going is going to buy Starmer time. It doesn't necessarily solve his problem, because Mandelson and the judgment call around that is not the be-all and end-all of his problem, albeit it was a bad judgment call and one he's conceded shouldn't have been made.
We watch this space in the coming months. I wonder if, probably unanswerable question, I wonder if he'll still be around the next time we get together and do a mailbag. We'll find out. Now we come to the section called Let's Ask Union Questions of Todd. We've got a couple, one from Andrew, one from Donald. The first one from Andrew: are unions looking at any novel for Australia, or at least worker rights, like requiring board representation or for workers to be put before shareholders? And this is something that I think I first read about. It's happens in Germany. and has always been talked up as an idea. Todd, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's definitely the idea that's been kicked around before. I have my own reservations about it, but in essence, it's sort of similar to like a German model where workers within an industry sit on the board of the company, and it's sort of meant to sort of foster a sort of collaborative capitalist approach with respect to the governance of the company. The idea is it's sort of it's a family. The union and the workers are invested in the profit share of the company and its mutual success. And there's always been talk about, is that a way that you can change, say, corporate culture in Australia by electing union union representatives, either from the delegate of the work site onto the board or someone from the union or something. I have my own reservations. I have reservations about it as an idea. And it's often I think it's often very neat in labour circles to go, oh, here's a cool idea in another culture, another form of the economy. Pluck that out, drop it here, see how it works. It's going to fix everything. My concern has always been that we're sitting on a board, the amount of fiduciary duties that come with it. You end up putting, I think often you'd end up putting a lot of those workers or representatives in a sort of conflict of interest about the information that they would be privy to. There is definitely circumstances where worker representation on boards works really well, like particularly in, say, state-owned corporations, government entities, public regulators, where they're actually there in a sort of advisory role. It's actually the diversity of experience and stakeholder perspective that they bring makes them a better advocate. But when the way our sort of Corporations Act is operating, the sort of overarching desire, overarching need for the financial interests of the company, I don't think it actually helps. Like, being one of 12 people at the board table doesn't change the corporate strategy of an organisation in an easy way. I have some reservations about it. That being said, it's a great thought piece. You always see it come up, and I presume ALP National Conference is coming up pretty soon. It'll appear in some of the magazines that get handed around beforehand. Like, it's one of those ideas that's always kicking around. I'm particularly interested in what role getting union representation on some of these bigger regulators, like, say, the RBA and some of these other big institutional pieces, not so much in the private company space.
Thanks, Andrew, for that question. And the second question is from Donald. What should the ALP or trade unions do to make sure that humans are at the centre of AI application in government, workplaces, and the wider economy?
This is pretty topical generally. Like, the government's announced late last year the federal government's announced their AI Safety Institute and the National AI Plan. So for people interested in it, there's basically two schools of thought about how we regulate AI going forward. The first is AI is this big existential major technological change that is coming for every facet of the economy. The world will look completely different when this is everywhere. And so big problems require big solutions. And so the first school of thought is that you basically create like an AI regulator, mandatory rules, one big organization to go and regulate AI in every way, shape and form, basically chasing down AI as it pops up in various parts of the economy. The second school of thought is the one the government's adopted with, which I think has some merit, which is the idea that AI is a lot like every other technological change. It's very similar to automation. It's similar to the widespread introduction of the internet. These are big economic changes, and we deal with them in the way they operate through our existing apparatus. Like, there's nothing actually that special about AI algorithms or a digital workspace than, say, a physical workspace and the introduction of automation. And so what the federal government's approach has been is a national AI plan, which basically steps out sort of their goals and objectives about what the regulation of AI should achieve, and the creation of an AI safety institution, which will be the job to do capacity building. And effectively the government's answer is, well, the way we deal with AI in workplaces, we deal with it through the existing Fair Work Commission, the Fair Work Ombudsman, through the Fair Work public sector department. We deal with it through our industrial laws, and we deal with it just like we would deal with anything else that came into workplaces. The way we deal with AI in banking, well, that's something for ASIC to deal with through its powers to regulate banking and finance. The problem is those agencies keeping up with the pace of technological change. And so the AI Institute's job is to basically think of it as more like a quarterback than anything else. Like, it's calling the play, but the idea is it's trying to direct these agencies to be to have the capacity and the training to use their existing powers, or if they need new powers, give them new powers to deal with the way AI operates in its industry. There's a bit of debate, obviously, within the movement as well as other circles, but the government's opted for the second because they feel like it's a more dynamic approach to it. what are our existing frameworks and how do they catch up or regulate it, rather than, say, setting up a whole new set of like legal or regulatory architecture to deal with AI.
I'm such a Luddite when it comes to AI. Like, I literally had to ask ChatGPT before we did this show, what's my opinion on AI? But
you might be becoming the funniest person later finding this.
With gags like that, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even the complexity of having to train health and safety reps.
I was just about to ask that, Todd. Does that mean, I assume, well, obviously unions are going to have to go through a whole process of upskilling their own staff, whether it's HSR reps or organisers or whatever it might be, about industrial officers, about how AI is impacting work, because they then have to be able to go and, well, inspect it, advocate for it, organise around it, like whatever it might be. It's a whole level of literacy that has to be in the union movement as well.
Absolutely. But I think that capacity building, literacy expansion is coming for everyone. Every anyone I speak to in the sort of employer circles is in the same just absolute just rushing to try to get their head around just what this is going to mean. Like, I make no mistake about it. Like, it is coming for every corner of the economy and society. It's going to change the way we do a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of benefits, but there's also going to be a lot of risks and a lot of cons, and there's going to be a lot of jobs gone as part of it. It's interesting to see the way, like, some of the projections about how AI will do to like entry level knowledge workers, what automation did to sort of entry level blue collar work. Like, it won't be nurses and teachers on the chopping block. It will be like paralegals or entry level professionals, like that white collar work. That stuff is it's really interesting to think about what that will do when so much of our economy has moved to a service based economy, and so much of it now is probably open to this economic transformation from the use of AI and algorithms or digital work systems. But to your point about like unions having access, like unions having to understand it, it's not so much that, and I think the business groups have gotten ahead of themselves really heavily on this bill, that there's some sort of desire for us to peer under the hood of every algorithm under the sun. It's actually just about making sure that, like, it's about inspecting the work, and if the work is safe, then it's not a problem. If the work is unsafe, it's about trying to understand with the employer, well, how did those decisions get made? And just because a machine made them doesn't mean that you're off the hook for the unsafe workplace that we've arrived in.
Yeah, you're still accountable for what happens in your workplace.
Yeah, and you can't outsource in the same way. You can outsource your decision making, but you're still the decision maker.
Much like the Prime Minister.
Yes, I was trying to do a good throwback there.
The last question, thank you, Donald, for that question. The last question is from Gus, and it's, I'd love to hear Todd's thoughts about what excites him about Australia's union movement today. Oh. Now, if there's ever a softball to be lobbed down the middle of the plate and Todd for you to have a big swing at, here it is.
This is a very exciting question. Thank you very much, Gus. The thing that excites me most, almost certainly, is like the next generation or the youngest generation of unionists and union members. I think, like, people say this before, and I think I've said this on the pod, the kids are all right. Like, the ones coming up, they can smell inauthenticity from a mile off. They know that the system has not been set up for them. They are more politically aware than I think we have ever given them credit for. And that they are activists, like, at their core. They see politics as part of their lives, and they've completely rejected this sense of, like, you have to live to work. I think that the kids are all right. And I mean, I was reflecting on today, I actually spent some time with our Union Summer interns. So University of Wales, we run a program called Union Summer. It's been around forever. I think it's like 25 years now, where roughly about 30 young people spend 3 weeks working at a union, and they go and spend time at work sites or down at the Industrial Relations Commission or at work. Well, I actually did the program, like, God, now it must be like a decade ago, or if not more, where I spent every day at like 6 a.m. at a truck stop with the TWU, just organising truck drivers at 19. That was heaps of fun. But just talking to those Union Summer kids today, like, the future is there's a lot to be bleak about in the future, but the next generation and their views about the world is not one. I don't think they have realistic optimism about the world, and that's the thing that excites me most.
If I can concur to that, I mean, I literally just run. Half the reason I was a couple of minutes late to our recording was obviously I was doing some work with the SDA, and they're running a program in somewhat similar to the intentions of the unions, New South Wales Union Summer Internship Program, the leadership, trying to identify young leaders. These guys were from, working in retail and working in fast food between the ages of, I think a couple of them were in sort of year 10 or 11, right through to sort of, university level. And just really switched on. Like I walked into the set, it was public narrative, which is a pretty heavy kind of stuff. And I walked into the session thinking, shit, normally I'm training, doing workshops with adults, like, sort of post-university, been working in the workplace for a number of years. And I was like, oh, how's this going to go? And they were just so switched on, really knew what they were about, very much engaged in terms of what their values are and what shapes their values and what's bullshit and what's not bullshit, and super motivated about the role that unions play in their workplace and the connection that unions have with the political side of things and how laws are made and how it's important for unions to stick their nose in all of that to shape their future, because it's very much in their hands. That's certainly what I took away from the session. It was only 90 minutes, but it was really, really, so to echo your point, the kids are all right, Todd.
The kids are great. I can't understand anything they're saying, though. All the slang they've come up with is just, I feel so old. Like,
dude, I'm 50.
You're 50?
Like, I was like,
I'm in my mid-30s. I didn't think I was that old, but I've been firmly put in my place by a number of interns over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, and I reckon there was gags going across the room that I just was not getting. Some of them were about me, some of them weren't.
And the hand gestures, they've got like code, there's hand gesture stuff. It's insane. But it's great. Like, good for them. Like,
yeah.
Get a Gen Zer on the pod.
I'll need a translator.
Yeah, I was going to say, and we can subtitle them or something.
Yeah. And what did they just say then?
It's all right.
Yeah. All right. Now we come to the section I think is probably called let's hear from Lissie about what's going on in Victoria's State politics. Andrew asked a question. Lissie, can we get an assessment from Comrade Ratcliff on the lay of the land in Vic politically? As always, appreciated.
Thank you for the question, Comrade Andrew. Well, I would say so since we last got together for Mailbag episode, Victorian Parliament has reconvened for the year. And obviously it's an election year, so we're down to the business end of things. The government has laid out the Premier's kind of laid out a strategy for the caucus and cabinet, and it's kind of all, she's talked about it, media as well. So they're looking at making things basically safer, easier and cheaper is kind of their pitch to Victorians, which all makes pretty good sense at this point. But I think that as an early indicator of how the contest is going, on that first week the Premier came out swinging pretty hard with a new policy around making it easier for people to access diagnosis and treatment for ADHD. Which is, and had a great personal story attached to that about how, her best friend had a real trouble getting a diagnosis, and the best friend's kids, and it all, it's just one of those things, again, we're getting access to basic healthcare and things and support that would make life just a bit easier. Is just unreasonably difficult, and this is the government kind of going out there and saying, well, we're going to do something about that. So I think a cracking first kind of big new policy for the year from Jacinta Allen and the state government. I think the Liberal Party here, as much as they've got a new leader and she's kind of trying to make things or remake the party in her image, I think they are still hostage a bit to the fact that their federal colleagues are a complete rolling disaster. And I would just like to maybe take a slight sidestep to heartily endorse David Feeney's description of them on the show last week. All of his descriptions of them, but also that they're so bad at this point that I've almost stopped engaging because I just can't be bothered keeping up with how bad they are. But I think so. I think that's a genuine anchor problem for the state libs here. But yeah, I think the Premier's come out hard in the first couple of weeks, and I think that's a really good sign for her and for Labor for the rest of the year.
There's a question from Ryan, which I kind of want to sort of close out the episode talking a bit about One Nation as well, and not just in Victoria but across the country, and I'm keen to get Todd's thoughts on this as well. But Ryan asked, it'd be really interested to hear Lissie's assessment on how One Nation have been performing the public polls and how this could play out in the state election come November. And obviously we spoke at length about One Nation on the last week's Feeney Files with Jesse McCrone, so I don't want to sort of repeat ourselves, but what has happened since then is Barnaby Joyce has said in the paper that there are several Victorian state Liberal MPs that are considering defecting across to One Nation ahead of the November poll. And, you know, you hear that and you sort of think to yourself, if you're the Jess Wilson, the opposition leader here in Victoria, this is probably your best shot at winning government in over a decade. There's a change of leadership, and whenever in the government, and whenever that happens, that creates opportunity. And then you hear Barnaby Joyce say that, and then Barnaby Joyce then comes down to Victoria and starts attending events in the regions and whipping up support amongst One Nation potential candidates and starts to basically go on a recruitment drive for One Nation candidates. You know, there's a real chance here that One Nation could be the sort of the Joe for PM. I'm using a really 1980s reference to politics here. People might have to research it. But just being a spoiler, I want to listen to you first, and then we might broaden it out in terms of One Nation across the country, because obviously those federal polls showed them now leapfrog on primary, the federal Libs. If you're the Vic Libs, Lissie, how worried are you about their Barnaby Joyce and One Nation here and how it would play out in Victorian state politics ahead of the election?
Oh, look, I think they should definitely be worried. And I think that, you know, you mentioned that Barnaby Joyce came down here and sort of headlined a conference of sorts out in the Western District the other day. Well, there were other people there too, being the leader of the state National Party, Danny O'Brien, and also the Bev MacArthur, who's in the leadership team for the Liberal Party in the upper house, and he's in a very different part of the party to Jess Wilson, albeit is one of the people who's allowed Jess Wilson to be the leader. So I do think that it still comes down to this fundamental thing, like, what is the Liberal Party? What is the point of the Liberal Party? Who are they for? What are they for? And I'd still fundamentally think that there is a schism down the middle of their party where they just do not agree about either of those questions. And I think that, you know, you've got this kind of notionally moderate-ish teal type group of people from the, you know, largely the eastern suburbs and whatnot. And then you've got a bunch of other people who are, you know, either from the regions or much more conservative or all of the above. And those people, they don't agree. And the second group of people are much more inclined to be sort of in the One Nation way of things. And as much as, you know, Barnaby Joyce has gone out there and asserted that he's, you know, in conversations with some members of the Parliamentary Liberal Party here, I have it on good authority that is actually in fact the case. So defections are not out of the realms of possibility, and they have pre-selections on at the moment, and maybe some of the people who come out second best in that might find themselves over that side of the fence. But I do think, you know, as much as I think it is still the case that the majority of One Nation's vote is coming from, you know, Queensland and regional New South Wales and place like that, and Todd, you know, defer to you entirely on your state. There is no doubt that they are getting part of the vote here, and it is a further splintering of the right-wing, you know, part of the population where they're going. And if I'm the Liberal Party, like, that's not helpful to me. That and the fact that there's a bunch of things that One Nation are going to say and do over the next year in the lead up to the election that some parts of the Liberal Party agree with, and that is going to be a continuing wedge problem for them, because they will be things that the majority of Victorians will not think are acceptable.
And before I go to you, Todd, just one other thing to add to that. It was funny, there was an article, and there's an extensive article on ABC Online this afternoon about this particular topic, and there was a quote from a Liberal strategist in Victoria that said, it's not just a problem for us, it's also going to be a problem for Labor. I'd like to see them hang on to Melton. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I thought Melton was on your list of seats to win. Are you now subcontracting these other seats to the far right of Australian politics? You know, you people are not fair income. Like if you want to win government and if your strategy is to grab seats in the outer suburbs, you have to win Melton, not One Nation.
That's right, because you have to be, in Victoria at least, you have to be able to count to 45 to win government. And if someone else is winning those seats, that you aren't. Like they're not on your path to 45.
Yeah, bonkers. Todd, there was a Fox and Hedgehog poll. That sounds like it's made up, but it's true. It's a polling company called Fox and Hedgehog. Anyway, it sounds delicious. In South Australia, obviously there's a South Australian state election next month, and it has One Nation neck and neck with the Liberals. It's a sample of like 700, but still. And Labor's in an unassailable lead, but the Libs here in South Australia right now are in a dogfight on primary with One Nation. I wouldn't have ever thought that in my life. That is super interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on digesting that bit of information I've just thrown at you now. But also just, your experience of One Nation in New South Wales as well. They've been reasonably strong, right, from time to time. Are you worried about the impact that One Nation can have on Labor's primary vote at either a state level across these states or at a federal level?
Look, in the short run, not terribly worried, mainly because the sense is that the increase in their vote is coming from the Conservative side. So it is that the fracturing of the Conservative vote is starting to coalesce around One Nation as an opponent. All of the political downside in the short run is coming off the side of the Libs. And I think all eyes are turning to South Australia. I think I'd read that they're going to contest every single seat. And that reminds me of the sort of a fundamental challenge that One Nation has always had, which is just their lack of party infrastructure and party discipline. And I've often seen in state elections, I think this happened in a Queensland state election years ago, the more candidates One Nation runs, the worse they end up doing because candidates start popping off over the course of the campaign.
They're hard to manage.
They are a difficult group of candidates to stay on message, more difficult than normal pre-selected candidates. In New South Wales, we have had One Nation. Technically, One Nation has elected 3 members of the New South Wales Upper House, but not one of those 3 people is still involved with One Nation, as far as I'm aware. They're all now sitting as independents for a variety of different reasons. Where they have managed to succeed in electing MLCs in New South Wales has been where they haven't run a lot of candidates, but they've chosen to run candidates in strategic areas of value for them or high voter turn, rather than the sort of random people that One Nation is able to recruit and run in all sorts of random seats. The more candidates they run, often the worse they do. So whether they can jump that challenge, South Australia will be a really interesting test case. All eyes are watching SA and the results. In the long run, I am worried about One Nation more from a sense of what does our two-party system or our democracy look like if Pauline Hanson is the opposition leader? What do those debates look like? What does the political discourse look like? What is their economic, part of me tends to think that when you get to the big seats, you start getting critiques for things like a lack of a tax agenda or an economic agenda, or, you're not able to play the same one song over and over again, which is where the One Nation have been able to do. But the sort of the wedges or the debates that they might be able to create, the impact on Labor could be it's scary in the long run. But as I said, in the short run, it's all upside and great theatre, and I, just will keep Labor oppo and Liberal opposition research teams in, dirt units in full employment forever, as long as they're running.
Done. And I know we need to wrap up because I reckon someone in the background is making dinner for you, Todd.
Definitely not for me. I think there's a cup of tea being made.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, very good. Well, first of all, thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers that wrote in questions for this month's mailbag. Greatly appreciate it. This is our 3rd mailbag, and I think we're starting to kind of get an idea about how we want these episodes to run. But really, it's just sort of, topics you're interested in hearing Todd and Lissie talk about. Even if you haven't got a question, but just, throw a topic at us and say, hey, discuss would be great. So to do that, you need to become a Patreon member or subscriber. But the links are in the show notes. Please do so. And if you become a financial member, you're obviously supporting the show, which we do greatly appreciate as well. Todd, thanks very much for coming on the show. You've stood up to the reputation of being the funniest person in the Labor Party. Well done.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Thank you, Steve.
And Lissie, Ratcliff, thank you very much for your contribution today. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Todd.
And we'll be back next week, I think, with another episode with Emma Dawson from the Chifley Research Institute. So looking forward to that. Au revoir. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.